Okay, why don't we go ahead and get started? Hello, everyone. It's Meg Bouvier, and welcome to Ask the Grant Writing Expert. You know me as the person who created the course library that you all have access to. I'm a neuroscientist turned NIH grant writer turned a neuroscientist turned NIH staff writer turned full-time NIH grant writer. You can tell that I'm very tired. It is October 5th, so this is one of the 3 R01 deadlines of the year, and you probably can see I have lots of circles under my eyes, as I'm sure many of you do as well. This is a day of great celebrating in my company and in my family as well. I am leaving on vacation tomorrow, and we'll return in a week to kind of clear the decks and do the remaining case submissions and R21s and resubmissions. But a lot of the bulk of the hard work is behind us at this point. So we kind of wind down and then we begin the 4-month cycle again. So anyway, I'm here to answer your questions today. So grab a cup of coffee and let's get started. So for those of you who are new, just a reminder that you are in listen-only mode. There's a Q&A box and you can type your questions in there. I'll also be reviewing some questions that I got from people during the week. In terms of updates, we're still, I think the Master the PNU series has now been released. We just got clearance from the Massachusetts Medical Society for the CME accreditation for that course. And I believe it is now, the update is live on our website. So you should all have access to that at no cost to you through your organization's membership. So in addition, I would imagine that for many of you, if you are applying for a resubmission, you may want to be thinking about watching right now my master resubmissions course. Or if you're really ahead of the curve, you may want to be starting to do all your prep work for a Cycle 1 2023 application. So you may want to, for example, watch Master the R Series Part 1, which is the preparation part. All of my courses I'm moving towards checklists and milestones and shorter lessons to make it a little easier for you guys to work your way through that. The checklists are becoming interactive. We're moving toward making them downloadable as well. The other thing I want to let you know is that we're in the process of scheduling tutorial topics for upcoming Ask the Grant Writing Expert sessions. I think we're booked currently through the end of October, and I'm picking topics for November and December. So if you have any, let us know. You can either just put it in the Q&A box or the chat box, or you can email me at meg@megbouvier.com. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. I am going to pull open my list of questions, although I see that there are several already in the Q&A box. So let's see what we have here. I just submitted an R01 yesterday to NIAAA ARM panel. Will the October, and congratulations, by the way, to anybody who has submitted for October 5th, you probably look as tired as I do today. Will the October panel see the grant or the February panel see the grant? I'm not sure what you mean by an October panel and a February panel. So the way that this typically works, when you say an ARM panel, I'm assuming, Julie, that is a standing study section at the Center for Scientific Review. Is that correct? There are hundreds of them, so I don't know all the acronyms, but I'm assuming that is the case. So if you're submitting for an October R01 deadline, usually it's assigned to, let me just see if when will the reviewers on the study section see it? Okay, so if you keep checking ERA Commons, you will get a date that your study section will have the meeting. Of course, your 3 assigned reviewers are going to be assigned relatively quickly, and they're going to see it sooner. They're going to see it ahead of the study section meeting. But usually the study section convenes usually somewhere like 2 to 4 months after the deadline. So it will probably meet for an October 5th deadline, early October deadlines. It'll probably meet sometime in December or January, somewhere in there. It's usually like 3 to 4 months later. And then if it does well at the study section meeting, it then has to go to the council meeting, which will occur sometime after that. And it's hard to know, all institutes are a little different when their council meetings are. Basically, it's like 9 months before you get an answer. I don't know if you're asking for that reason, Julie, or if you're asking because you're concerned about that window when you can upload post-submission material. So if you're worried about post-submission material, which you can upload up until 30 days before the study section meets, keep checking back in ERA Commons to confirm what your study section assignment was and to see what their next study section meeting date is, and then subtract 30 days from that. If you're asking because you want to know when you'll have a decision, if it goes all the way to council review, it could be as much as 9 months. I always joke that it's like having a baby, and probably about as painful. Okay, so that was the first part of her question. When will the panel see it? Also, when are scores, assuming we get a score, likely to come out? So this is a multi-part, so I'm just going to hold my cursor here because there are more questions coming up. So you will get a score, but not the full summary statements, usually within like a week of the study section meeting. And then it will be usually about a month after the study section meeting that the summary statements will be uploaded. So in other words, if you keep checking back to ERA Commons, usually about a week after the meeting, you'll just see the score. Like, let's say you scored, an 18 and it's, the 7th percent, may you be so lucky. You'll see that score, but you won't be able to access the summary statement yet, the full written reviews. That will take several more weeks. Also, what really qualifies as a conflict with a reviewer? Yeah, that's kind of the million-dollar question, right? So you can always make a case for what you think might be a conflict. So usually if the person, let's say, obviously if they have anything to do with the project, they're in conflict. Or if they read it ahead of time, they might be in conflict. But I assume you're asking for some other reason, such as this is a direct competitor or that kind of thing. You can write your reason in the assignment request form for why you think a certain reviewer should be put in conflict. And you can say, this is somebody who's a direct competitor in my field, or if you've had some issue with this person in the past, you can always make that case in the assignment request form. Certainly, it's not going to work if you say something like, historically, this person has not liked my work. That's not going to work. So I don't know if you have a specific reason in mind that you want to divulge, and I could let you know my thoughts on in the past, whether I've seen people be successful in getting that person conflicted, but you can type out the reason in the assignment request form. Oh, and you have it here. Like if you published with them in 2014, but have not since, does this qualify as a conflict? I doubt it. I doubt that would put them in conflict. It would have to be something much more direct, like they're a direct competitor, and allowing them to see a project in this early stage could be risky for you, or they're already involved in the project. It has to be something that's a much clearer connection. That's not a clear connection to me at all. Okay, hopefully that answers those questions. Here's another one. I remember you talked about inserting solutions after each point in the rigor of research section, and I have been doing that as well. However, they overlap with the innovation section, and I need to cut down half a page to adhere to the 12-page limit. Since innovation is one of the 6 RFA criteria, what do you think? Well, so is significance. But here's what I would do. I would you could do this one of several ways. It sounds like the logical place to give the expanded treatment of this information is in the innovation section. So I would definitely leave your short paragraph description there. In the rigor of prior research, where it's like, your solution to what the gap is, you could just give a one-sentence summary and then refer them for detail C innovation. You could do something like that. Another thing you could do is take that our solution part out of the rigor of prior research entirely and just end the significance section with a separate paragraph where you discuss your proposed project. And within it, you would give a very succinct treatment of how you're going to fill the gaps in the literature that you laid out in the rigor of prior research. But, this is true for a lot of things in the research strategy. Not every reviewer reads every word, and most voting reviewers will only ever skim. So you find yourself in a position where you're repeating information. And typically, that would be true, for example, for the preliminary data. So you find yourself in a position of asking yourself, where's the most logical place to give the expanded explanation of this piece of information? And in your case, it sounds like that's the innovation. And then in other places, you can just give like a one-sentence summary or some really succinct statement about whatever the thing is, and then say for detail, C innovation. And if you've numbered it, your paragraphs in innovation like B1, B2, you could even say C B2 or whatever it is. So hopefully that helps you get down to your 12-page limit. If people have other questions about getting within the page limit, I have all kinds of thoughts about how to do that. So I'm happy to answer questions if you want to know other tips or tricks or strategies for getting within the page limit. I've been spending a ton of time of doing that just today. So I spend an inordinate amount of time trying to help people get within the page limit. Okay, so next question. Can PI and trainee use the same project to apply for different funding? No. So I don't know if you're talking about on a case submission or a T32 or an F submission. But the rule of thumb is you cannot have the same science in review simultaneously at NIH. It doesn't matter if it's a different PI, a different mechanism, whatever. It's completely verboten. So the only time that that is not the case is, and you have to do this with permission, if you're writing a program project grant, a center grant application, and you have multiple projects within it, which are similar to R01s. They look often like R01s. They're usually 12-page projects. The PI for the project is usually allowed with permission from the program officer to submit that R01 as an R01 in parallel to the center grant application going in, with the proviso that if the center grant is funded, you forfeit the R01. That's the only time that you can have the same science in review at NIH simultaneously. However, you can have the same project in review elsewhere. So you could have it being reviewed at NIH, and you could have it being reviewed at another federal agency like DOD or NSF. And you can also have it in review at a private foundation. You can just shotgun and apply to all these places. But no, the grantee, the trainer, the PI, and the trainee cannot submit the same project to NIH simultaneously. No. Okay, so hopefully that answers that question. Can you elaborate on what is expected from the significance/impact section of the research strategy and aims page? Well, first of all, those are two different things. So let's just clarify for a moment what the scoring criteria are. So on the vast majority of NIH applications, you have 5 scored criteria: significance, innovation, approach, environment, and investigator. Impact is the overarching scoring criteria. So it overarches all of those, okay? And you will receive a general impact score. So your question is, can you elaborate on what is expected in the significance/impact section of the research strategy and aims page? So let's start first with significance. So what is expected there is that most people do, by convention nowadays, some sort of a lit review, like a background section. So if you're working in some sort of area where there is a clinical problem, even if you're looking at a molecular mechanism that is at play in many cancers, you might begin with some statement about these cancers and how this mechanism is at play. Or if you're dealing more closely with patient populations, give the disease burden and all the information pertaining to what the problem is with the patients. And you want to talk about morbidity, mortality, cost, number of people affected, things like that. So truly the scope of the burden of the problem, not just to the patient, but to caregivers and to society in terms of cost and lost work days and that kind of thing. Then you move on to talk about the background information and what the knowledge gap is in the field, including the rigor of prior research. So the rigor of prior research is not meant to be a very lengthy catch-all background section. It's meant to be a critical review of the handful of studies that most closely inform the design of your proposed project. So, and talk about the strengths and weaknesses of those projects and, what the knowledge gaps were. And then you talk about what your proposed project is and how you're going to capitalize on the strengths and address the weaknesses and fill the knowledge gaps that you've just carefully laid out. So that would be, it's all about patience and advancing the field, informing future therapeutics or elucidating underlying pathophysiology or something along those lines. How is this going to move the needle in your field and ultimately help patients, even if that's pretty far down the road? So that's what's expected in the significance section. The impact, I usually include an impact statement in both the aims page, and I usually include it at the end of the significance, but it's not wrong to put it in the innovation or at the end of the approach section or in multiple places if you're lucky enough to have space. The impact is much more general, and it should be punchier. It should be a shorter sentence or several sentences. And I give lots of examples of these in my trainings. So if you don't have time to go watch Master the R series, just look at the manual. And it's a downloadable PDF. You could just search for the word impact and you'll see I have like half a dozen examples there. But basically what you want to say in your impact statement is something along the lines of, results would elucidate an underlying molecular mechanism in this class of cancers and would elucidate the underlying pathophysiology. Eventually, it could inform the design of future therapeutics. It could potentiate the work of others. It could, ease disease burden. It could change clinical practice. It could change the clinical paradigm and what the thinking is. It could identify subtypes within a disease. It's the ultimate deliverable. What is your product that you're offering society by taking several $1 million of taxpayer dollars? What is the deliverable? How are you going to move the needle for taxpayers in terms of their healthcare? That's really what the impact is. And on the aims page, it's usually a sentence or two. Within the research strategy, it's usually a paragraph. So hopefully that answered your question. Okay, and then another question. It seems like 3 to 4 pages is the maximum for a 12-page research strategy. I assume this is connected to your question about significance. Is there a rule of thumb for how long the significance and innovation could be? Well, that's really kind of all over the place. I guess the shortest I've seen is a combined 1-page significance plus innovation section where like 3/4 of the page is significance and 1/4 of the page is innovation on a 12-pager. That was very popular a couple of years ago. That seems to kind of have fallen out of favor. And now what I see most often, and I'm just saying this based on what I see, but to be fair, I probably work directly on about 100 applications, NIH applications a year. So I've got a pretty good cross-section of these. In the last couple of years, I would say what people seem to be doing is a much more exhaustive literature review in the significance section. So instead of keeping the significance section kind of short and punchy and salesy, there's been this drift over the last couple of years toward a longer and more inclusive significance section. Some people even include their preliminary data there instead of in the approach. It's not my favorite. I think reviewers actually look for preliminary data in the approach section. But you do have to refer to it because you're doing rigor of prior research there, and often you're talking about your own data when you talk about the rigor of prior research. So I would say nowadays, a pretty typical significance section might be 1.5 pages, 2 pages. You know, if you're doing a lot of lit review and preliminary data, it could be 3 pages. I don't often see a significance section longer than 3 pages. Innovation is usually about 1/3 of a page to 1/2 a page, unless it's a methods project. If it's a methods project, it might be 1 page or more, because really that's the juice, right? Like it's a methods project, so it's all about the innovation. You know, that this is some tool or some something that is a completely novel tool or platform or whatever that you're designing. So you have more to say there. So so I hope that that helps. In my Master the R series part 3, where I talk about significance and innovation, the writing of it, there's a table that I have there that's kind of an at-a-glance table, and I give the page ranges there as well, just so that you're aware. And again, for people who don't have time to watch the course, each section is under an hour. I think the entire 4-part course is like 2.5 hours. If you don't have time to watch it, you can just download a PDF of the slides from the learning management system or a PDF of the manual. So that may help people as well. Okay, so that is what I see in the Q&A section. Again, feel free to type any questions there. And I am going to turn my attention to questions that came in during the week. Let's see. What is the definition of early stage investigator status and the expiration date, and how many years after training completion? So this is readily available information online. All you have to do is type early stage investigator, and my light is not working. So I feel like I'm in a strobe light here. So I'm going to actually turn this off, and I apologize because it's very rainy today here in Western Massachusetts. So it's a little dark, but that's better than the strobe. So if you just Google early stage investigator status, the NIH, a website will pop up. But in brief, it's a funding advantage that is conferred on grantees who are 10 years or less from their terminal degree, or if you're a clinician, 10 years from your when your clinical service ended. So let's say you did a clinical fellowship and then transitioned into doing a postdoc or a research position. The clock would start when your clinical fellowship ended. And if there's any confusion about when the clock starts, you can ask your program officer. For some people, there are questions because they may have spent several years in industry, and by rights that they're not applying for NIH grants during that time. So to my mind, that shouldn't be included on the ESI clock, but you have to speak with a program officer about it. The other piece of it is that you have not served as a PI on an R01 or equivalent. So remember that ESI only applies to R01s. So the funding advantage only applies to R01s. And so if you apply for an R21, you don't get any advantage as an ESI, nor do you lose your ESI status if you're the PI on an R21. So this is only an R01 thing. It's meant to help people land their first R01. So anyway, that's something I get a lot of questions about. And I think we may have discussed recently how to apply for extensions. A lot of people are applying for extensions right now due to research interruptions because of the pandemic. So you, the grantee, are meant to apply for that, and you should apply for the extension before it expires, ideally, and probably a good 3, 4, 5 months before it expires, because it takes several months to get an answer back. And be as detailed as possible in your application for extension so that NIH can figure out how much time to add back to the ESI clock. Okay, I had a bunch of ESI questions, but I think I answered all of them. Oh, actually, there was one more that I wanted to make note of. So one of my grantees asked, my ESI status runs out in late January, even after applying for any eligible extensions. So I'm out of luck now trying to apply for an R01 under ESI status for the February 5th deadline, correct? And the answer to that is not necessarily. So I had, about a year ago, a program officer advised one of my grantees. He had his ESI status was running out. Actually, it was last year at the end of September. And he wanted to apply for an October 5th R01 with ESI status, because it's a significant funding advantage. It's like 5 percentage points difference. So it's a lot easier to land an R01 when you have ESI. And the program officer said, all you have to do is upload the grant application before your ESI expires. So I think his ESI expired, I want to say, on September 30th. And he uploaded like on the 28th of September while he's still at ESI status. So not only was he able to get that submission in with ESI status, but there's a rule at NIH that if you put in an A0, a new submission, say right before your ESI status expires, as long as you submit a resubmission, an A1 on that original A0, within 13 months of the original submission, the resubmission is also judged as ESI. So for this particular grantee, his ESI status expired on September 30th. He uploaded just before that an October 5th application on September 28th. So he got ESI status for that. It wasn't funded. And then he submitted the A1 the following year. He's actually preparing it now for the November 5th deadline. And as long as he submits that on like October 28th, because that's the 13-month cutoff, that will also be judged as ESI. So we have one more minute. If anybody has questions, let me know. I want to encourage people to invite your colleagues to this. Remind you that this is recorded and available on my YouTube channel, so you can watch any of these. The questions and tutorials all have timestamps, so you can just zoom ahead to whatever is of interest to you. If you have questions that I haven't answered and you want to submit them between our AGE sessions, you can email me at megbouvier.com. And again, I'm setting up tutorial topics for the upcoming months. So if you have any that you'd like me to do, I know some people have sent me some topics already, and some of the topics that are coming up, I think our next session, I'll have a guest who will be talking about the new data monitoring plan that NIH has put into effect, which is leading to the next form set, which will be used in 2023. So she attended a webinar on that, and NIH is going to be giving us a recap of that information, and has posted that as a blog post on my blog. So there's a nice summary there. And I think upcoming sessions, I'm going to be talking about the early career reviewer program at the Center for Scientific Review. And I think I'm also going to talk about the 3 resources that are kind of mission critical to subscribe to at NIH. So if you have opinions, feel free. I'm here to answer your questions. So I'm always happy to take suggestions for tutorial topics or questions you'd like answered. It's truly my pleasure. So thank you all for attending today. I hope you all take some time to recover from the cycle 3 deadlines. I know I will. I'm very, very tired. And hopefully when I see you all next, I'll be a lot more rested and ready to start cranking up the 4-month cycle as we gear up for the cycle 1 2023 deadline. So thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful day. And thanks for attending as always. See you next time. Bye-bye.